All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to our today's learning session for marketing research. Please interact with me kindly here in the chat box just by showing any emoticon face for now. So you can use any of those emoticon face there in the chat box. That will help me to actually understand that you are able to see the screen, which I'm currently sharing, that you can hear me very well. There are no any technical issues. Just show any mood that you have there, happy face, smiley face, or anything in that interaction box there. So today we will be focusing on chapter 12. And in the textbook, you should at least try and have a textbook in front of you because that's going to help you to highlight some of the important aspects that we are discussing. I'll help you with the where you need to highlight if you follow, or you can underline or use any method that enhances your learning as well as the teaching experience. So chapter 12, you will see it's about preparation and processing of primary data, and that is on page 256. So you will see on page 256, you've got some sort of learning outcomes indicated there, but we need to talk about the overall objective of the chapter and where does it fit in the research proposal, which is our overall objective of this module. So firstly, if we're talking about preparing and processing of primary data, you'll remember that last week we spoke about data collection, where we indicated that interviews must be conducted. We should hire people with certain skills, for example, your communication skills, your interpersonal relations, as well as things such as responsibility. And we talked about survey errors that can be eliminated. So at this stage, we've collected the data. So on the screen there, you'll see the figure that we have, which is a Microsoft Excel, showing some sort of an example of the data that has been collected. So usually with this data collection is that we use a questionnaire. So if I share with you another project that was done, we've got this company called Rooibos. We helped them with the research project. So this was their research project whereby we developed a questionnaire, and you will see in terms of the questionnaire, this is a scanned one. So people were interviewed and then we complete the questionnaire by using, in this case, instead of the cross, we're circling the answers. So here's an example of a questionnaire whereby we so as I was saying here, apologies for that. In this case, we had respondents, they had to actually, question one was saying the following is a list of skincare brands. Indicate to what extent you are aware of each skincare brand based on the scale below. So the company that we're doing this research for is the first one in this list, called African Extracts. And respondents, they could circle that they are somewhat aware, and you'll see some companies such as Nivea, things such as your Pond's, things such as your Johnson's there, you'll see they said they were extremely aware, this respondent. So this was one person completing this questionnaire. So once they completed this, we need to capture this into Microsoft Excel. So to illustrate once again, so this was Rooibos. If we open the data set for Rooibos, once it was captured, we had something that looks something similar to, let's see here. So we have something similar to this. It becomes our data set whereby we collected. So you'll see here, for example, it says questionnaire number is the first column there. So those were the respondents. So you'll see it goes from questionnaire number 3, 4, 11, 12, 13, continuing. You will see that it's not consistent in a manner that maybe it means that it's in chronological order. That's because some questionnaires were deleted, meaning that we could not use them. For example, questionnaire 1 is missing, which means we did not use those results. That's what we're going to talk about today. How do you handle such situation whereby you've got a questionnaire and that questionnaire you could only use a certain aspect or certain data, not the overall data. And you'll see questionnaire number 5 up until questionnaire number 10. They are not there, but let's concentrate on this respondent. The first one, you'll see here it talks about variables. So it says question 1, awareness of skincare brands, and it's based on this questionnaire where we ask them. So you will see the score there goes from 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all aware, and with 5 being extremely aware. So the first variable is this one, which is African excrets. So hence you will see here it says variable 1, this respondent, because we are moving along the rows now in terms of each respondent answers. So he's got the first variable 1, meaning that this respondent regarding African excrets, he is not at all aware about this brand. And this was some of the results that we published to indicate that they should focus on things such as maybe enhance marketing efforts to increase awareness about the brand. But we understood why we've got such low answers there, like low awareness level. And then you'll see with this data, it's just numbers, and that is an important part of our chapter as well. Where we talk about it's not weights that we're using here. In whatever question we ask, whether we ask demographics. So for example, if we look at this questionnaire design here, you will see a question such as, for example, section C, respondents demographic. Question 9, asking respondents, please indicate your gender. So I'm just illustrating for you the importance of including numbers when you develop questionnaire, because we're going to use these numbers as our data set when we capture it. So imagine if we did not have these numbers, it was saying indicate with a cross. It means after we've collected the data, we had to also do coding whereby we indicate whether mainly it's number 1, number 2, and we have to redo that. So putting numbers it's called Precoding actually, but we're going to cover all those rest in this chapter today. So for example, once we know that, okay, question 9 in this case was indicating, please indicate your gender, we can easily have a glance here, moving along to the last question in the Excel spreadsheet. That was question 9. And you'll see the answers that we have here is only 2 and 1s, but you can see how much 2s are dominating. So, and that is one example, just illustrating what gender or most the respondents, which gender they were. So if you go back to a questionnaire, you'll see that 2 were females, 1 were males. So in this data set, you saw 2 being dominating, meaning that we've interviewed more females than males. And that also made sense because this was about a skincare brand, and its target market is mostly females in this case. So let's look into in terms of theory, and you will see how much this practical or me showing you the practical parts or side of it will help you to understand the theory now as we go through how we're going to handle the data that we've already collected. So going back to the textbook and going back to page 256, let's start by looking at the definition there. So it says data preparation and processing. So if you highlight, starting on page 256, you want to highlight that 4th line there. talking about raw data, saying raw data is meaningless. It must be prepared. It must be processed before being analyzed. And you also want to highlight the second paragraph on page 256, first sentence, talking about to prepare and process raw primary data into useful information. And it must be validated, edited, it must be coded, it must be captured into electronic format such as Microsoft Excel file there. So you want to highlight that sentence, which is the second paragraph on page 256, giving you some sort of a background or some sort of a definition or explanation of what this chapter is all about. So it's a process of converting raw data into meaningful information. Maybe you'll also want to underline how we use the weights data as well as the weight information. There, for example, in that sentence, you can see that we've got data and we convert it into information, because these are also two terms that we use more often in research. And I want to show a practical example so that you understand basically the differences that we have between data and information. So the Excel spreadsheet that I've just shared here, showing you Rooibos data set, you will see this one is just numbers. These numbers, if you look at them, they are just meaningless. That's what they mean by showing, saying that it's raw data. They are just meaningless. Like, the only way we can provide meaning to these numbers is when we start doing analysis. For example, when I've looked at that question 9 to say this was about respondents' gender. And then, so now I've just spoke about how 2 is dominating here. So in this column, so if, for example, we have to present the results here regarding this question, which was about gender, usually you will want to do some sort of an analysis using the Excel to do the calculations for you. But just to illustrate, but we'll cover this in chapter 13 into detail. We'll talk about your mean and so on. So, for example, if here we were had to use Excel just to find out how many people were there, we can use some sort of functions. Like on Excel, you can use things such as count if, and then it counts for you the data set. At some stage, you'll have to develop a report, and you will get used to all these functions that are on Excel, how you have to use them to make recommendations, to make meaningful results, and so on. So if you use that count, if it tells you how many people are there, and then you summarize that into results, for example, if it's 50% females, but in this case, obviously, it's more females, it will be something such as more than 80% females. So that sentence you're gonna write, whereby we called it interpretation of data that you've collected, it becomes information, and then the Excel spreadsheet where it shows numbers or raw data, that's the one that we refer to it as the data. So the interpretation, for example, it could be 1 or 2 sentences whereby we said, let's say, something it will be out of, hypothetically speaking, maybe there were 350 respondents interviewed. 75% were females. So you can see this is not data, it's information because it's meaningful. And another thing that will help you to differentiate between data and information is sentences that have numbers, and then those numbers are converted into percentages. So when you see something such as a sentence that shows you a percentage, remember, percentage is out of 100. So in other words, that was already analyzed. So most sentences with percentages are information rather than data. However, if this sentence, we did not have that 75%, for example, our sentence was just written that part, and it was just saying out of 350 respondents, or 350 respondents were interviewed. We cannot interpret data as information because we don't know the details of those respondents. What was their age? What was their income group? And those interviews, what did they say? So you might have a sentence having numbers, but it does not mean that a sentence with numbers is always information. But percentages, on the other hand, they show information because it's already been summarized for that. So looking in terms of this definition, the process of converting raw data into meaningful information, we are basically saying that we will be analyzing an Excel spreadsheet. And then in that process, there are 4 things that we usually do. First one is data validation. Second, data editing, data coding, and data capturing that you have there. And if you highlight in the textbook, you can highlight on page 257 there. It shows you number 1 being validation of data. And then to understand what is data validation, you also highlight the first sentence there. It talks to you, it says, this is the process to ensure that data is valid and that data is accurate. So what exactly are we talking about with validation? Think about the word validation, what it means in general scope. It means that basically you want to make sure that the data is not fake. So validity talks about data being a true reflection, no interviewer cheating errors or anything like that. So the first thing once the data was collected is to check whether that data is true or not. For example, we know that most of the time it happens that interviewers or field workers they become too pressured with the workload or achieving the quotas that becomes part of their responsibility. For example, if they had to interview 30 respondents in one day, and maybe they see that now it's getting late and they've already interviewed maybe 15, so the other 5, sometimes they may be taking it at home and then I'll complete it myself. So that data becomes invalid because it's not accurate, first of all. So we must validate the data first. So the question is, how do we do that? In research, we've got 3 guidelines that can help us to validate the data. So you can highlight as well on page 257. The first one, we do checkbacks. That is written there. Highlight the first sentence under checkbacks. Between 10 and 20% of respondents whose names appear on the questionnaire are called or telephoned to check that they were in fact interviewed. So that could also help us. Remember now, let's say the respondents were putting their contact details in the questionnaire, or maybe we already had their contact details. Maybe we're using something such as telephone interviews and so on. So we can easily just do it random check, call maybe they say 10 to 20%. So with a sample size of 500 students, for example, we will call about 50 of them. And then we just call those respondents, they answer, we ask them, we tell them that this is Mr. S.G. Maslangu, is a researcher for a project that was conducted at TUT, for example. Can you remember participating in such any research? Did you meet any person asking you questions about whatever the topic is about? And then if they said yes, they participated, then that is one method whereby we say no, the data it is valid, the respondents confirm that. That is checkbacks. The second guideline that we can use is called the review questionnaire that you have test number 2 in the textbook, being at the bottom of the page there, being the last paragraph. Review the questionnaire and the interviewing instructions. So what this means, remember, the overall objective is for us to actually validate the data, to say the data is true, the data is accurate. So when we do review the questionnaire and the interviewing instructions, remember we've got questions. So let's go back to a questionnaire that we have here as an example. So if I open this one, which is about rooibos, you will see you've got list of questions that we have here. For example, I've already showed you a question about skincare brands. So let's say we've asked this question. We said Please indicate to what extent you are aware of each skincare brand. And then the respondents will say, I'm not at all aware, like the last one you see, the Body Shop, the respondent indicated that they are not aware of it. As you go down with the questionnaire, you'll find a different question here, asking them again in here as number 2. Please indicate the most preferred skincare brand that you are currently using or you intend to use. And then this respondent said, I do not use any skincare brand, which was 0. So you can see that the answer is quite consistent with what he said here, because this is about the skincare brands that they are aware of or they are familiar with. And then the next one is currently is asking them about usage. So imagine if this respondent said here, I'm not at all aware of the Body Shop, like he said here. And then the next question, which is question 2, he said, I'm currently using the Body Shop. So if this respondent selected number 13, we will not use this questionnaire. It's not valid because it means that this respondent did not understand question or it was fake data. So most of the time when we interviewers or field workers tend to cheat complete the questionnaires, they don't pay much attention between alignment or relationship between one question and another. So when we are able as researchers to review the questionnaire, review questions, review the data to indicate or to ensure that the data is a true reflection, it's valid and indeed accurate. So another method that you have, you'll see it on the next page, on page 258. And you'll see that it's written, you can also evaluate the reputation of interviewers. So in the textbook, they talk about the important parts, the reputation of the interviewers. So in other words, the people who conducted this research or who interviewed the respondents, we can easily assess them, how responsible they are, how can they, how trustworthy they are. So we can actually measure a lot of things regarding the interviewers. Let me use an example here to illustrate. Let's say we're conducting this research and we hire an external company. Maybe we hire one of the research companies that in South Africa. Remember, this subject, it's nice because it's kind of flexible. In your qualification marketing diploma, you've got various subjects or various skills that you can specialize in. So for example, if you take marketing research and then you say, you know what, out of that diploma that you have, instead of focusing on maybe personal selling, being a salesperson or being a brand manager or communication, you want to specialize in marketing research. You can start your own company, for example. Let's quickly run a Google search here. Let's say marketing research companies. So for example, here in South Africa, some of them you're quite familiar with them. For example, most of the time when they do this advertisement on TV, you will see they will write the disclaimer, how did they collect data. For example, this one, market, it's SAMRA, sorry, South African Marketing Research Association. It's one of the research companies, which is also a board. So once you have a research skills, which means you are able to develop a research proposal, you are able to send that research proposal for evaluation and they accept it, you can collect data, you gain experience, you gain reputation. After some time, you will have things such as 10 years experience in conducting research and so on. So if this research is conducted by someone such as a person with all those credentials, they've got skills, they've got things such as testimonials, reviews, we will say we trust that data set based on the people who conducted the research. A different example in this case will be whereby this research is conducted maybe by secondary school learners, and then we can evaluate or we can question that and say these people, they have never been exposed to marketing, they've never been exposed, or maybe it's students at the university level, but they are not studying marketing or they don't have research as a module. These students maybe are doing something such as architecture, engineering, and so on. So we can easily say we can question the data it might not be accurate, it might not be valid, because these people had no skills, they've got no prior knowledge towards how to conduct research. For example, they didn't know how to handle some survey errors, or ask questions in a manner that it should be asked. So these are the 3 guidelines that you see there on the slide as well as in the textbook, for us to ensure that the data is actually valid and is accurate. And that's what validity is about. It's about actually asking you whether the data that has been collected, it was collected truthfully, is it accurate, and can we actually put money on it and say this data it's a true reflection of what the respondents feel or their opinions and so on, rather than the field workers or the researcher themselves. The next step, we have validated our data. Maybe we use one of these methods. We decided to use the first one, check bags, and all of them it checked out. So let's start by going to the next one, which is data editing. You'll see on page 258 there in the textbook. You've got the definition that you need to highlight, which is the first sentence under editing. Is the process to ensure that questionnaires are complete and they are correct. So in this case, it's simply looking into these questionnaires. Remember, we've got this questionnaire as an example that I'm currently using. Is for us just to go through all of them and say these respondents have answered these questions. They've answered almost every question here. We're trying to check the mistakes or whereby they did not complete a questionnaire. Maybe here they jump it or they completed completely wrong. So it's just that process whereby when we do editing, we want to make sure that no question was left unanswered. So how can we do this in research? We do it in 2 formats. That is written on page 258. The first one being field editing. We spoke quite a bit regarding field or the term field in our last class, where we talked about this is out of office. So whenever you've got the word field work, it's out of office, out of the lab, meaning that it's in the park, in a shopping mall. As long as you are not inside the building, that will be field. So we can do this process while in the field. For example, let's say this research is about shoppers, which are people that go to the mall to do some shopping. So maybe the research is about shoppers and we go to main lane. We interview our respondents at main lane. We can decide to edit the questionnaire while the data collection process is still taking place. For example, we can have your supervisor with field editing. Maybe after every interview, at the end of the interview, as a field worker or as a interviewers, you take your questionnaire, you give it to a supervisor. The supervisor can quickly check. The advantage about field editing, they talk about quite a bit on page 258, is that you are able to catch mistakes as they occur. You can rectify them immediately. For example, if you find that actually these respondents did not answer a question about maybe they are how much they are aware of gift card vouchers, maybe that are sold at mainland. Remember that respondent is still around the shopping mall. We can quickly run to him and say, sorry, we missed one question. Can you tell us? So it has that advantage more than the central office editing. So with central office editing, we don't want to delay the process of data collection. We don't want to interfere with it. We collect all the data, and once the data is collected, we analyze every questionnaire. We ensure that every questions they are completed correctly. And this brings us to a question whereby actually what's going to happen now, whereby you find that questions are incomplete and we are completing the central office editing. And we've got that question whereby respondents did not answer all the questions. They are no longer around. And at some stage, maybe the questionnaire did not even ask for their contact numbers, so we can't even call them back. So we tend to find such situation, and we must know how we can handle those questionnaires. So you will see on page 259, you can highlight there. You can also write maybe words such as NB, because that is an important part with practical questions in the assessment. to whereby you suggest or you propose how, as a researcher, you should actually handle questions that have not been completed. So you've got about 5. Okay, yeah, I remember the slide that I'm using is the previous textbook. So I see here in the new one, they are using 4. So you've got about 4 suggested ones, suggested or recommended methods. First of all, you can contact the interviewer or contact the respondents. And I see that they've put it as bullet number 2, go back to the interviewer or respondent. So they combine those into one. So that's the first option that you have. For example, if I call the interviewer and I tell the interviewer, question number 100, you interviewed this person at this time. Remember, with these questionnaires, we also indicate the time, the place, the date where the interview took place. It's for such things whereby even interviewers will be able to remember. So maybe let's say that questionnaire, the respondents did not complete something simple such as their gender, which you can easily identify, or it could be something such as their age group. The interviewer can remember such details. For example, let's say we do this central editing every day or on daily basis, and then we say earlier on the first respondent that you interviewed, can you still remember, was it male or female? They can remember such details at some stage. So we can either call that the interviewer or we can call the respondents directly, and you simply ask them at their agenda and tell them that you missed this question or any other question. So that's one method that we can use. The second method that we have there, you've got edit or complete the questionnaire. We can do this ourselves, whereby maybe the respondent did not complete certain part of the questionnaire, and we can edit on their behalf. But it does not mean that you should have a fake data. You should just complete it randomly. So you go into detail, you look at the questionnaire, you look at questions, and you are able to see the alignment, and you can also provide some sort of a hypothesis, which is a guess, meaning that you can guess the respondent's answer. Let me show you a practical example as well here. It could be something as simple such as income, whereby we said, please indicate your monthly income. And then let's say the respondents here, they left it completely out. They did not answer this question. Looking at the previous question here, it's about education qualification. You will see that it goes from no educational qualification to some sort of higher education, such as your doctorate and so on. If a respondent in this case selected 8, for example, and then they did not specify their monthly income, we can assume that these people, they are not earning less than 1,000. You can assume a certain amount, or let's use a different example. Respondent said no qualification and so on, and then we can assume the type of income that they have, because qualifications and income, there's a relationship. It could be a different, simpler question than this one, complicated, because some people can question such and say income and education, they are not related. But we know as researchers, we know they are related. So we can't argue with science, we can't argue with data. And it can be a question such as number 1 and number 2 is a different practical example here. We asked the respondents, they should indicate to what extent they are aware of each brand. So let's say the respondents in this case, they've said they are not aware of all these brands. So they've just ticked 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, all of here. So we are already assuming that these respondents, since they are not aware of all brands or skincare brands, there is no way they can come here and say they are using a certain brand. You cannot be unaware of a brand that you are using. So if that respondents did not answer this question, we can easily complete that questionnaire for them and say they are not using any of this brand, because they said they are not aware of any of them. So that is some sort of a different practical example that I can show you how we are able to edit or complete the questionnaire on behalf of the respondents. You have to apply your mind and think about the insight that you are adding value there to each questionnaire. So the important part is that you don't do it randomly. And whenever you answer this question practically, you also have to show that relationship between your study variables to show that you are able to use one question to guess or to provide a hypothesis for another question there. The last 2 options that we have, whereby we've got questionnaires that are incomplete. You will see you've got discard unsatisfactory parts of the questionnaire, which is different from the last one. The last one being discard the whole questionnaire. So you will see in the textbook is written beautifully there. It says discard the questionnaire completely, meaning that we throw away the whole questionnaire. So regardless whether they did not complete a certain part, so we've got those two options there. Let's say the respondent, in this case, let's come to demographics because that is a sensitive area. Most of the time respondents are not quite happy or motivated to complete questions such as any demographic question. For example, you'll find some questionnaires after collecting data from question 9, all those questions were not answered. For example, the respondent did not indicate their gender, they did not indicate their age or their home language, which it could be something about race issues, ethnic group issues. They are not comfortable with you as a researcher trying to say associate who they are with their income and their things such as usage of skincare brands. So they completely did not complete all this part, their education level, their income. So let's use that practical example. They've completed the question and ended it on the last question, which was about question 8, and then when it comes to question 9, respondent demographics, they completely left it out. So if you look at these two options that we have here, discard unsatisfactory parts of the questionnaire or throw away the whole questionnaire, it will be suggested that you use option number 4 because it makes more sense. Although they did not complete the demographics, they still completed quite a meaningful information about their usage, the influence. So you'll see there's quite a lot of questions here about familiarity, where they buy these products and why they purchase these products, how much they spend. So that all this information, you cannot just throw it away. It's useful, although we cannot link it to who they are. In research, that is quite recommended. The researcher answers or responses should not be identified with the response, whether they are male or they are female. Is part of the ethics. So we can still use the whole questionnaire and just throw away basically that part about demographics, which means even when we analyze our results, we write our research report, we don't say anything about the demographics, but we still report on awareness, we still report on preferences and so on. And sometimes you'll find that a questionnaire which whereby the respondents, you can see that all questions or most of the questions are just answered unsatisfactory, then you can throw the whole questionnaire. That's where it will work. So these are the strategies that we have, how can handle those unsatisfactory answers. So that is all about editing. We can do that while we are on the field, can do it at central office there. So once we have edited our questionnaires, meaning that we now have a new sample with valid questions, with valid questionnaires, with correct and complete questionnaires, we can start to focus on coding of that questionnaire. So you will see now the second last part that we are discussing in this today class. On page 259 there, at the bottom, you've got coding. You can highlight the first sentence. That is the procedure of categorizing data, specifying categories, classes in which respondents must be placed, allocated, and so on. And at the bottom of the page there, you will see you've got those 3 basic steps that you should highlight as well. How does coding works? Firstly, we must specify of categories. Number 2, allocation of code numbers to each category. And last one, compilation of a code book. It could be a code book or we do it manually. So you will see if you open on the next page, they differentiate for you between pre-coding and post-coding. So on page 260, you want to highlight that at the bottom of the page, that last paragraph, first sentence. Precoding, it's explained there, it's a predetermined categories in which answers must be placed when the questionnaire is designed. At this stage, code numbers are also allocated to each category. So you'll remember the word pre, how it works. It means before, like preschool and so on. So it means before data collection, we allocate numbers to a questionnaire. So this is a recommended method. Remember, I've indicated that when you develop a questionnaire, try and ensure that respondents are circling answers, or they are marking cross on the numbers. So they are not putting. You don't just leave it blank here and say, yeah, use a cross, because you'll struggle with post coding. Remember, post coding now, if you read on page 261, first sentence there under post coding, you highlight as well. It says post coding is when the data is coded once it has been gathered, collected. So once you've gathered data, and then maybe you did not have all these numbers, and you start to allocate numbers to say, African Scratch as a brand is variable one. It includes moderately aware, all these numbers. In simple words, any questionnaire that has numbers like this, it's already pre-coded, and this is recommended. But let's talk about situation whereby you can't use, it's impossible for you to actually do pre-coding, because I also want to illustrate to you something that is going to be useful here. When we talk about your research proposal, we talk about your research proposal a lot, and then we talk about all those data collection methods that you have under research proposal. And we talk about using quantitative data versus qualitative data, which at this stage, I think you grasp the meaning of that, to say quantitative is about numbers. So as long as we have these numbers, it means we are collecting quantitative data here, because it can be easily analyzed and the respondents can complete it quickly. With qualitative is a different scenario. Let me use an example with this question here. Question 3. Can you see this question? It says, on average, how many days in a month do you use facial skincare products? How many answers do we have here that are valid? We've got 32 answers that are valid. So, for example, a person can use 0 there, can use from 1 up until 31, because those are number of days in a month. Some people use skincare brands every day, so you can have 31. Some they use it more than 31. They actually use it less than 31 days. For example, maybe they use it twice, or they use it after 2 days instead of using it every day. So you'll have respondents who put 15, you'll have respondents who put 7. Some use it occasionally, that could be once a month and so on. So all those answers, you can see there are no categories, meaning that the respondents had an open answer field, and hence this question becomes more sort of a qualitative data that we are collecting there. But with these numbers, when you have to type this on Excel, so you will see now question 3, when we quickly run there to Excel, and we look at our data set, and we quickly run to question 3. You can see now these respondents that we had here, most of them use it every day because they said they use it 31 out of 31, but you've got those one who don't use it, like 0 there. You've got another respondent somewhere here with 31 days, 25 days, 31 days, 12 days. You can see all these numbers. We did not have them in the questionnaire. They did not circle this. They had to write it down, meaning that what we had to do here, we had to do a post coding. So if we do a post coding method, we cannot have data set with 0 to 9 to 31. That's a lot of variables. When we analyze, when we draw a bar graph, it's going to show us 31 bars or 31 slices of the chart, and that's not going to be useful for us to analyze the data quickly. So what we usually do with this, we come and we say, okay, we're going to conduct a post coding. So if we do that there, and then we're going to code this questionnaire. It was asking them how many times they use skincare brands in a month. So if we say first respondents, we say the first code, it could be weekly, for example. And then every respondent who actually selected any number between 1 and 7, we say those respondents, we call them category 2 instead of having that. So we also need another category here. It says do not use. This one state all respondents that selected 0 in the database. And then we allocate a code for them, and then we say that is code 1. So what I'm doing here is post coding basically. Most of the time you won't even have these numbers at all. So the question might be an open-ended question. For example, what is your opinion regarding things such as racism? And then people are asking, are writing definitions, they're writing answers, or maybe what is your opinion regarding data prices in South Africa? And then people will write, it's quite expensive. What else will write different weights then, and we're going to use those weights for us to develop categories, and that's what post coding works. It usually works on qualitative data with open-ended questions. For example, you can continue here and say, for example, the last category is monthly, and then that gives us only few categories that we have. For example, say any respondents that say they use it more than a week, which is 8 days to 31 days, we put them in one category there. Or you can, if you want, you can add more categories. So if we did this, we will have categories 1, 2, 3, or data set will have only 1, 2, and 3 here. But here we decided to use a true reflection of respondents' answers. There was a different reason for that. But I think you do get the idea why we do this post coding with open-ended questions, not close-ended questions there. So in most of the time, let's say you have to develop all these numbers and you've already collected data, you'll have to follow these guidelines which are shown down on page 259 up until 260. You've got those guidelines. They are very detailed there. So try and read for understanding. For example, the first step, they tell you there you must specify categories or classes, meaning that there must be an equal distribution amongst your data. You don't want to find our data set, for example, in this example, which is most respondents being 80% selected this. So if you find that, you know what, this category need to be expanded so that it accommodates more categories, that's what they're talking about. They recommend sizes to be actually very equal. That works. If they are not equal, it's based on the data that you've collected. It can direct you. That's where we talk about your normal distribution. I'm taking you back to stats a little bit. You've got the normal distribution curve showing that that is a normal data, but sometimes you have to find your data being skewed to the left and right and so on. And that's whereby you have to look at your categories and try and specify them differently. Then you allocate codes, which I've just did to show you an example to say this respondents who selected once a week is code 1 and so on. And then when you prepare a code book, it's basically a book that shows you what does 1 mean. For example, your code book will tell you that question 1 was asking about gender, and then gender had 2 variables, variable 1 and variable 2, where 1 stands for female, 2 stands for male. So your code book will look something similar to when you look in the textbook there. You've got a code book on page 264. It tells you what question we had, what code numbers we had, what do they stand for, so that when you look at our Excel data spreadsheet, it's easily for us to understand those numbers there. The last thing is data capturing. So we've already have that data set which completed the questionnaires. The respondents, firstly we check that is accurate, is valid. We've checked the questionnaires are complete. We checked if they are coded, and now we must capture the data, which is basically talks about on page 264 there. You've got capturing of data, and you can highlight there, they give you a definition. This is a process of entering codes or responses into the data file. Most of the time we use Microsoft Excel. We've got another software, very powerful software, this one, SPSS. If you can look into this software, it's able to analyze, but the license is quite expensive. It's just an illustration for you, just to know that you are not limited to Microsoft Excel to capture your data. So by all means, if the company is willing to purchase this software or they have the rights to use it, it's mostly recommended, because on SPSS you can easily just, with the click of a button, draw all pie charts for all variables. With the click of a button, analyze your hypothesis, as well as maybe to draw diagrams, because it can also draw models as well. So SPSS is another version, but with data capturing, the process that we have there. So in this case, this slide shows you an overall picture of your chapter 12. So your chapter 12 is about all those categories, and it also have guidelines and steps that you can do to make sure that the data that you've collected is valid. It's also is captured correctly, hence preparing and processing of primary data. It's one thing to learn from theory. It's one thing to learn from listening to me right now. It's one thing to learn from watching the slide or viewing the video. We talk about this a lot in terms of teaching and learning, that as students learn differently. You've got people who are very strong with understanding the weights. Some are strong with eyesight. For example, myself, I'm a visual person. When I see pictures, when I see videos, I learn faster than when I see theory, but you've got students who learn faster with theory, with weights and so on. So another method which is very important, it's a reflection, which is a collaborative learning. So we must learning by doing, that's another thing. So I want us to reflect on this chapter and run a quick survey where we run a game there, and we'll discuss we've done this almost in all the classes, so you are familiar with it. Last week we had another quiz session, so it's only a few questions, but it's very useful. So please take your time when you answer these quizzes. So for learning activity, I'm quickly gonna type it here so we can have instructions for this learning activity. So it's learning activity 12, and it's the one that I've sent to you via email. So it will be very good for you now to spend about 2 to 3 minutes. So let's put that instructions and read that the first case study, not the second one, because the quiz game is based on the first case study. So if you quickly, just to illustrate, this email that told you about that we have class, you'll see there's an attachment there, return learning activity, or you can click that link there. In future, if you don't read this before class, you might struggle to connect a bit. So try and read them before class, spend just 15 minutes. Does not necessarily mean answer questions or do all the questions, just read and get an idea. So you can do that now before you play the game, because if you're gonna play that game without reading this case study and understanding this case study, spend some time looking at the questions, thinking about the answers, because you're gonna answer exactly the same questions in a form of a game, showing us leaderboard and so on. So let's quickly put those instructions there and run the game code. So with 7 questions is about 7 minutes. So let's say we're gonna run the game from now, past up until 25 to. So let's add the times here. Learning activity firstly. Let's say read. You use this case study, which is a student daily TV schedule. Read. You can spend your time reading that case study even now while I start the game. And then let's add time is just a half paragraph, so even a minute or 60 seconds is more than enough to understand what's happening there. But let's say make it 2 minutes. So let's quickly run the quizzes game so we can generate the code. As soon as you have read the case study, you understood, please start immediately to play the game. You don't want to spend more time reading the case study and less time answering questions. So it will be better for you to actually be on the same page, because we're also not gonna be able to continue playing the game. We have to end the game so that we generate report, we discuss feedback together. So for best experience, once again, it's recommended that you use 2 devices, but if you don't have 2 devices, use 2 different tabs there on your internet and on your Google Chrome. If you are using that, use 2 tabs, whereby the first tab you are playing the game, on the next tab you are still or you are using the Microsoft Team apps, you are still on the Microsoft Team apps, because I'll be sharing the screen and the screen will be showing you the overall board. So while you play the game, try and have a glance, look into the overall board and see whether you are doing great or not. What's your score compared to the other students' scores? Use any nickname that you like there. And we've got the game code now. So as soon as any participant has joined, we'll start the game. So I'm going to end the game. It's just 6 questions. So 7 questions, 7 minutes. After 7 minutes, and then we discuss feedback for that. It will help you a lot to to reflect on what I was presenting today. I don't want to say what we've discussed today because it's less of a discussion, but we will have that chance once we have all your report here. So there is your instructions. And please don't mind the silence. I'm gonna unmute or mute my mic while you're playing the game. It's for you to concentrate, be able to answer questions or actually understand instead of listening, because you cannot do that. So I'll be quiet, but I'll still be this side. So if you've got any questions, it's a good chance. You can just unmute the mic anytime. You can ask any question. I'll still be able to hear you this side and I'll answer your questions. So I'm quickly gonna mute myself for now while you play the game, and then we'll discuss feedback just after the game.
So is it the second one, the one that says blue?
No, it's the first one about students' daily TV schedules.
Okay.
The first one, yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I can see some of you are still completing the quiz. So in the next 1 or 2 minutes, please complete it so that we can discuss feedback. All right, thank you all for participating. So we're quickly gonna end the game so that it generates a report for us. And quickly look at reviewing any questions that maybe gave you a hard time, and look at those questions just to quickly discuss so that you don't have or face similar problems in future. You don't repeat the same mistakes. Firstly, congratulations, Cross Black. Actually, you maintained that position #1 with just one incorrect answer, with other 6 correct answers. So, congratulations for maintaining position #1, Cross Black. Would you like to unmute your mic and say some few words there if you have any thanks? Maybe mom, dad, parents, and so on.
I say it feels so good, man. It feels so good. It's my first time playing this game.
And you win at the first try.
Then I win in the first try.
Okay, congratulations for that. Let's quickly go through these questions individually here and look at the ones that gave you hard time. So in this case, we quickly gonna look at the ones that with the red flags there. So a question such as this one, question #2, you can see it's quite good, 83% score. Some of the time we also get the score report where it shows things such as red questions. It means some students did not answer that questions. Remember, they are randomly, they are shuffled. So you get a different questions, each and every one of you. So sometimes it does not mean a bad question with the red, it's always wrong answers. It could be that it was not answered. So let's quickly go into that. Question 3 and question 5. If you can just have a quick view of those questions and discuss feedback based on that, it will be very helpful for you. So starting with question, let's see, the red flag was question 3. So if you quickly click here, question 3, you can see here it says 4 correct answers with 7 incorrect. So 7 students, they struggle with this question. It says, based on data preparation and processing guidelines, examine the stage that the researcher should consider in the following example. Researcher ensures that students fully completed questionnaires and correctly. So is that data validation? Is that data editing? Is that data coding, or is the data capturing when the researcher is busy ensuring that all questionnaires are completed correctly and they're completed fully? So if you look at your answers, you will see like 4 players and 3 players chose data validation and data capturing, but that is actually data editing. Remember, we can do this in an office or we can do this in a field. So if we quickly have a glance at the slide, the process to ensure that questionnaires are complete and they are complete correct, it's data editing. So we can do it while data takes place. For example, here could be maybe a TT campus, or we can do this once we've collected the data. So as long as it's about making sure that no question was not completed, and then we can edit so that question, hence it was data editing there. And then question 5 was also asking or it was also giving you a hard time in terms of answering. So if you quickly look at question 5 here, you will see only 4 students got it correct, with 7 students selecting incorrect answers. Okay, so if you read here, it says, according to the case study, MultiChoice has instructed you to interview students face-to-face by visiting them at various higher educational institutions, as the no list that contained their names and contact details was provided. So based on the data preparation and processing guidelines, propose how the researcher should handle the following scenario. The researcher found that 25 respondents did not complete questionnaires correctly. So now remember, they've already collected the data. So 25 of those respondents, it says here, they did not complete the questionnaires correctly. So what, as a researcher, you should do? Should you do checkbacks? Should you review the questionnaire? Should you contact the respondents or discard unsatisfactory part of the question or discard the whole questionnaire? So if you look at your answers here, you will see that 4 players, they've agreed on an incorrect answer here, whereby they say, let's discard unsatisfactory parts of the questionnaire, where else the correct answer was to discard the whole questionnaire. So let's have an argument here. Why is this only the correct answer? So in my own opinion here, all the students who selected number 4, discard unsatisfactory parts of the questionnaire, they are also correct. So at some stage, like I've indicated, we can use quantitative data. Like at the moment, I'm using quantitative data. It's just numbers telling me what you selected and your score. But when I'm using qualitative data process, meaning that I look into explaining or discovering your answers, I can see that your answer here is also correct, because 25 respondents, if you read here, 25 respondents did not complete the questionnaire correctly. So it's possible that those 25 respondents, one of them missed question 1, the second one missed question 7. So we can still use the overall questionnaire. So this answer is correct. And if you discard the whole questionnaire, is also correct. So this question was on purpose, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted us for you to be able to see also the relationship that it can also happen between it could be a decision whether you want to throw the whole questionnaire or you want to throw only a certain part of the questionnaire. Obviously, you'll make an informed decision once you know which questions were not completed, how were they completed, and so on. And ladies and gentlemen, we're still going to have class next week. I will update you thoroughly about your upcoming test there, and but it's we know so far that will be your chapters 10 from starting from sampling. No. Starting from sampling, yes, chapter 10 all the way going to chapter 13. So, but I'll update you on details and we'll continue on chapter 13 next week. Lastly, marking, I'm still busy marking. I think I'm 75% marked. When I see your hand, so they marked the marks at the moment. They come as I go through with the marks. So the ones that you see on Brightspace, let's agree that they are not final at the moment. I'll give you an update once they are final. They will be integrated. They'll be on ITS and so on. So at the moment, I'm almost 75%. So almost done marking. So I will update you regarding your final marks there. Mgwenya?
Sir.
Yebo.
So I was saying, are you still saying it's gonna depend on our marks if we're gonna get a second chance or not?
No, the second chance, the marks at the moment, no one's gonna get a second chance based on the marks. I'm only saying that they are not out finally, all of them. So based on the marks that you got at the moment, my first group, let's say foundation students, their average is more than 50% first of all. And remember, average is determined by overall answers. The highest is 94. I'm still with the other group marking the diploma students. I think I've marked 50% today. So it's possible that after class, if you want to check your marks, if you are lucky enough or your surnames, it's on the beginning like you are A, because that's how they are sorted. Maybe you might have your mark already marked, but I'm continuing as we go. So other students, everyone, you got their marks before end of the week, I should be done. But just to clarify or to answer your question, no, it's not going to depend on the marks. The marks, they came out higher actually than we thought. When we received complaints about time, we thought they were going to be very bad, but they are not that bad. Just to answer your question, but we do understand the time issue and so on. But based on the moderation report as well, the time was actually sufficient in terms of the test that you wrote. So unfortunately, no second chance. Bima Kanya, you asked, you raised your hand.
Sorry, sir, can you write the SIG test even if you did not provide those emails and whatsoever?
At this moment, I'm going to be very clear and as straightforward as possible so that we have more clarity on that question or on that issue. And you're asking a very important question. So I think let me be clear how we mark the SIG test. Once all SIG tests have been written, so every student, let's say they've written the SIG test, we compare, we look in terms of that test before we mark whether you have any missing assessment, meaning that you have either missed test 1 or missed test 2 or missed test 3 or missed test 4. So let's say I'm looking at that individual script or that individual student, and I find that all the marks are already there, meaning that the student had maybe 10%, they wrote because they wanted to improve 10% on test 1. I'm not even going to mark that test script if you already have a mark for test 1 to test 2, test 3, test 4. But in your case, your question was about providing evidence. So if you don't have any mark from test 1, any of the marks, write the test, try and send me an email and indicate the reasons why you couldn't write test 3 or whatever test that you have so long, but I will mark if there is no any mark there or in one of your marks and you provided me with that evidence. Remember, evidence does not need to be complicated. So if you do indicate that you had electricity problems, if you do have proof, attach it. But if you explain it and it's understandable that maybe there was load shedding and so on, as long as you have that email, remember at the end of the day, it's an affidavit, an email, it's your weight against me. So you can write the test if you're missing any of the test 1, 2, 3, 4, and yeah, test 1, 2, 3, 4. And I hope that brings clarity. Any last question?
So I think just before this class began, around 1 o'clock, I saw there was a mark updated there. So does this mean, because I was hearing people from class last week saying that the very low marks that were uploaded 2 weeks ago and the marks that we received, that we're going to receive today, are going to be combined? Are they combined? Is that the final mark now, or are you still going to combine them?
Yeah, because like in your case, it means that if your mark, let me just quickly share a screen because I believe in transparency. I also believe in providing clarity for everyone. So let's quickly share a screen here so that we are all on the same page and we're talking the same language. So if I quickly go to Brightspace, forgive me if you are a sensitive person, maybe showing one of your marks here or is showing here, it affects you. I'm apologizing in advance. It's just for us to have final clarity so we're on the same page. So I'm not going to go specific to someone's individual mark. I'm just going to use a random example. So if I go to the grade center, you will see here at the moment, in this group, so you're offering, this group is Diploma MK19. So at the moment in this online class session, there are 2 groups. The first group is this one, which is NDMKF0. So if I apply here, and I talk about that group first before I come to the second group, because it's going to be more actually making more sense. So all these students, These are my students. So if you look here, the assignment 2 is this one. So you will see the marks here, 40%, 50%, 30%, 76%. Yeah, 76%, and so on. You will see this is the group, first group. If you continue looking at the marks, you do have quite pure marks, like 34 marks. Then you get a jump to 72%, you go and so on. So you will see with this group, I'm already done. So if you belong into this group, this is your final mark. It's just not on ITS. So I don't want to use the word final, because with final, it should be on ITS. But in other words, I'm done marking this group. And I've run the average. That's the average whereby it's on 56%. And now if we come to the second group, which this is a bit one, quite a bit challenging to understand. Hence, I wanted us to share the screen so that you understand what's currently happening with your marks. You will see second group, this means this mark is already high. You can see 67%, 50, 53. It's just pass. And if you go down with all these students, you will see whereby the last person or the last script that I've marked, you see, like when I say more than 50% already marked, it's more like 50%. I think the highest at the moment is 80% in this group, because you can see the color there, where we're focusing on quiz 2 there. And then
scroll up higher there.
No, it's not quiz 2. Sorry, I don't want to use you as a practical example.
You can use me. I'm not embarrassed.
You're not sensitive person. Okay, but I just want to illustrate for everyone as well. I'll come to that. So the first person, you can see 64%. So I was looking at the wrong column. So assignment 2. So if you go down, it means all these marks are already final up until this student. This student, you can see from here, it says 10%, 10%, 4%, 10%. These are multiple choice answers only. So if I were to mark this student, for example, because it's the next student that I should mark. So if you go here, and then it also shows you, I think it's important for all of you who are here to understand how this process works. When you read here, it says not auto-graded, meaning that I haven't marked all these questions. So the only ones that are marked are the ones that you will see, for example, auto-graded, which was just multiple choice. So those answers are the ones without long questions and marks. So if your script is marked, let me show you a quick example. So ureke scrollele ko kae mo lebiseni na hao Makanya. So you you are right to say it was just before class when you saw the marks, because I was marking since the morning, hence you can see it's only half. So Makanya Pine.
That's correct. I imagine these marks hey,
yeah, 48. Yeah, so this 48% that is troubling you, that's the mark that is gonna go on the ITS. That's the final mark that you have. So you will see here it says graded by SG Mahlang, meaning I've already marked. For example, the first question you've already have 2 out of 2 marks, which means I've marked. Most of the questions whereby students are having low marks, it's something such as I want to show you here, whereby it was, you can see here whereby you did not provide anything, and I understand here it was because we were pressured under time. Maybe you said you'll come back to this question, but you can see it's written nothing, then that's when you get 0. And as well as questions such as this one whereby it says not text entered, not saved, meaning that you did not have enough time to write here, you did not do anything. So that was the time issue that most of you were referring to. But looking at the overall average, because the overall average is the one that determines whether this was a whole, is an opinion of one person or overall everyone. The average, as long as it's higher, it's disagreeing with those who are saying they did not have enough time, as well as the moderation process and everything else. So unfortunately, let's make peace with it, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone, please make peace with it. If your mark is not as high as you want it to be, please make peace with that. There is nothing much I can do, but the marks For those without marks, I'll finalize marking all the marks and put them on my tutor. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude because I have another class at 5. So I hope you had fun understanding. Next week, we're still going to have class. We will address any issues that you might still have. So in the chat box, please do me a favor before I stop the recording. Just use any emoticon face that you have representing your mood. Sad face, happy face, anything like that. Any comment is more than welcome. I hope you had fun with this learning activity. Please have a lovely day. Goodbye.